No, I'm no SEO expert. I really am not. I've been involved in a lot of different projects and I've been involved in a lot of different things, but I know Drupal from the user interface side, and I know what I'm trying to do, and when somebody who's an SEO expert says that they want to do X, Y, and Z, I can probably figure out how to do it. And I'm going to show you some of the user interface side of Drupal as it pertains to SEO. This is our website for the Fox Valley Drupal group, which we threw up when, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and we never did anything with it because we work over here on Meetup. So it's just kind of there, but you know, it doesn't rank too bad on some of the SEO stuff. People can find us there, actually. They can find our site if they're looking for something with Drupal in Illinois, and particularly Western Illinois or the Fox Valley area. They'll find us. But I updated this site a couple days ago, and I didn't spend as much time as I'd like to in preparing this, but I did learn a few things as I did it, and there's a couple other things I want to learn as follow-on to this. So it's very valuable for me to get up and talk and present and learn new things too. So it's always a challenge to add on to the repertoire that you've got in your bucket. So the way that Drupal operates with SEO, I'm going to start out with one module here that is in the section on search and metadata in the configuration part of the administration menu, and that's called the SEO checklist. If you're just getting started in Drupal SEO, this is a good thing to throw up there because you may not know some of the modules that you might want to put together. And there we go. And it goes through and it has a number of different items that you can go through, and it identifies some various steps that you can do in the SEO world that just kind of leads you through the whole process and points you to some modules to do some of the things you want to do. So, for instance, here the HTML purifier module is one that's identified here. I don't happen to have that in one of my SEO tools that I usually do, but that might be something that I would want to do in order to help my SEO on my site. So that's just one. You can load this up by going to Drupal.org. You can download Drupal. You can add a whole bunch of different modules to your Drupal installation and step through all these different processes. But the SEO checklist is a good one to start with if you want to learn about SEO and using SEO in Drupal. Going back to my search and metadata list here, I'm going to go through some of the various items that are here. One of the first things you start out with when you start up a Drupal site, it'll automatically set you up for clean URLs in Drupal 7. That did not used to be the case, but it does in Drupal 7. And that will get rid of the funny URLs with the question marks and equal signs and all that other stuff that might get up there that the search engines don't really like, and people don't want to click on those kind of things. It's got a URL aliases section in the site where you have the ability to be able to go in and set up your settings for how you want to set your aliases up. So for instance, there's that dash separator that Gary was talking about earlier, and whether or not you want to change those things to lowercase or uppercase, and how you want to handle things when your alias settings change, and strings that you might want to remove. Yes?
Can I just throw something out there?
Sure.
Never ever use uppercase. Always use lowercase all the time.
And you notice here that all these things are set up
Always the lowercase.
in your URLs, right?
Yeah, all the time.
And most of the settings that are in Drupal modules, when you install them, by default, they're set up kind of to best practices. So that's kind of a nice little benefit. You don't have to even know that, and it's automatically going to be done for you. So if you don't know what you're trying to do with the Drupal module, just leave the default there. Stick with that. You're going to be safe.
For the marketing folks that are running content, don't you use Google Analytics to find those uppercase and stop them on the site?
Yeah. Will?
What's the preferred method of handling the updates to the aliases?
My preferred method is to create new aliases and delete the old ones.
They're going to break URLs?
It's all 302.
It doesn't if you've got the redirect module in there. The redirect module will automatically adjust for you that way, and that's one of the modules that I'm going to be showing. So this is the settings on that. There's patterns that you can also set up for all your different content in the site. This is one default that you should change. The default that comes with Drupal, it would say content / the node title. You want to get rid of that content /. That's not really something that you want in there. In Drupal, you can set up different kinds of nodes, and those different kinds of nodes can have different patterns to them as far as how they're handled. For instance, you might want to say in a company, you might want to say company / the company name, for instance. If you've got that setting, depending on how you're going to use or display those nodes in your site. So that's all up to you how you want to set that up. By default, it'll use that node title, in this case, everywhere that it's not identified differently. Down here in our story paths and our web form paths, they're set up to use the node type in there. And there's a nice little tool called Token, which allows you to have all different kinds of things to come into play, and you can use these tokens to basically build out the structure of how these patterns are going to work in your site. So that's the token module, and that is default in 7, right? Am I right? Yes. Used to be a contribute module in 6. Is it still contribute? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I stand corrected. Thank you, guys. All right. So that's the URL aliases. Back to our search and metadata. The URL redirects, I mentioned this before, but you have the ability to be able to set up for your redirects how they're set. Gary was talking about 302 versus 301. So there's our redirect setting there. You have an import mechanism. So if you're coming from an old URL structure in an old site that you're moving over into a new site in Drupal, you have the ability to be able to import all those URL aliases so that they get redirected to the right place in your new site and they don't get a page not found. And you've also got the mechanism to be able to go in and take a look for 404 pages to be able to fix those things and redirect them someplace where it's not going to have a broken link. So that's the redirect module. The meta tag module in the old world of Drupal 6, there were 2 different modules that are covered by meta tag, and probably more than that actually. But the main one was page title, and page title and the metadata we already talked about a little bit. How that might not matter from an indexing standpoint, but it certainly does matter from a human readable standpoint, because that's the thing that's going to show up in your list.
Did you say that page title didn't matter from an index standpoint?
From an index standpoint, I think that's been the case for a while. But from a human readable standpoint, and from the standpoint of having your keywords that your site is indexed on, from a keyword standpoint, I think it does have some impact
That's
there.
very important.
Yes.
Page title.
Yes. So my point here, though, is that the meta tag module takes care of not only the page title side of things, which was a separate module in Drupal 6, so you see here that my global settings, my page title is set to the current page title with a pipe and the site name. That's the default that the module puts out there. So that's your default setting in Drupal for meta tags. Now, if I go to each one of these different sections, like the page front has its own page title setting here that can be employed. Will?
This isn't necessarily a Drupal question, but it applies to Drupal because it's kind of the standards that Drupal's using. Having the site name and the title of every page, is that a benefit or not?
I think it depends on the site. On how it's set up, really.
That doesn't dilute the actual title of the page since they're indexed?
I don't think it's going to dilute it. No, I wouldn't think so.
The most important thing in page title is to use keywords and key phrases that describe what the page is. And you don't actually need to.
Right. And you see here on the node setting, the main item that's there is the node title. So your node title in the Drupal world is the most important thing you've got, if that's going to be part of your page title there.
Right? I think the actual question though is, would it be better to drop the site name? Yes.
Pardon?
Would it be better to drop the site name?
I don't know if it would be better or worse. I don't think it matters.
Okay, so the most important thing are key phrases and key words that describe what the page is, because those can index the value in search. People are going to see it if it comes up in the search results. People are going to see this.
Yeah. Now, for those of you who've worked with page title in Drupal 6 or the earlier Drupal 7 page title, you'll notice here there's a section here for views. In the Drupal world, you have these things called nodes, which are pieces of content that you save in your system. And those nodes have different components to them. They can have fields and pieces of information in there, as well as your summary and your body and all this other good stuff. Well, those pieces can be pulled out in a report using views. So basically, views is a report writer that you can use to be able to generate pages of content. They're basically lists of anything that you want to have in there. So in the old world, you didn't have really a way to do a page title for a view. Didn't exist as far as I know. So that was kind of a deficiency. The new meta tag module does that, which is kind of nice. And so on. Taxonomy term, Drupal's got its own taxonomy categorization system that you can develop and you can fine-tune to do whatever you want to do in it. And so there's also taxonomy pages that are put together, which are basically lists of content that are tagged with those taxonomy categories. And so that's where that meta tag comes in at. So you see here in the node, you've got node title and site name, and by default you've got node summary, which is basically going to turn into your description, your meta description in the site. And then you've got also things like Open Graph and Twitter card tags that are embedded in that meta tag module as well. So the meta tag module is probably the most important individual module for SEO in Drupal these days anyway. Back to our search and metadata. Verifications. So, I don't have anything set up here, but if I want to add a verification, I can set up for any of these different engines to be able to set my verification up. I can do that right in my UI on the Drupal system, rather than copying that file into my root of my site, and then having somebody accidentally delete that or an update get rid of it or something goofy like that. So that's kind of nice. Metadata information here, verifications. Let's see, what else did I have in here? I also had in the configuration the global redirect module. That, of course, takes care of things like your deslashing and setting up the case URL, checking canonical links, that type of thing, which can be pretty important depending on what you're doing with your site. And I have this this guy right here. We saw the SEO checklist. We saw Path Auto. We just saw global redirect. We saw the redirect module. When I'm in editing a node, you know, I've got all these defaults that I can set up, that I've shown you in all the modules. But also when I'm editing the node, I can, a particular node or a particular piece of content, I can override what the defaults have been set up with if I have a particular purpose to do that on an individual node. So I have a lot of flexibility there that way.
Does a node equate to a page in a way?
A node links to a URL, okay? And with that URL, you can have a view come in with it, a report of other nodes. Or you can have a whole collection of other content, maybe a block or a content pane or a panel page or whatever kind of layout tool you're using. There's different strategies for layout in Drupal that you can use. And those are all coming along for the ride basically with the URL. So that URL can be a node, it could be a page view, any of those kind of things. But so all nodes have a URL. By default, node /492 would be the machine readable URL, and then that would convert to that alias URL for whatever, however I've set my URL alias patterns to. Okay. Yeah.
When you talk about global redirect, one of the big points about that is it actually will redirect the internal machine path to an alias.
Yes. Yes. So that you can override that, right? Meta tag we talked about, the redirect import and redirect we talked about. Pathologic we didn't talk about. I didn't go through that, and I want to get through this because I don't want to shortchange anybody. But the pathologic allows you to set up a fixed path for those things. Jason might have a better description of that one. I don't use it too much, but
Pathologic will deep through your content areas, and anywhere you've linked to internal content, it will fix.
Relative to absolute
it
references.
Will fix absolute URLs from localhost port 8888 / my page to the new server wherever you are. All the time. You basically give it a list of all the possibilities of it, and then when you move servers and like, I don't remember if it's on cache clear or cron run, it'll go through and it'll rewrite all of those for you on that server.
It's actually a input formatter, so the data underneath doesn't change, just as it renders the text, it adjusts it.
Yeah. XML Sitemap is just that. It generates your sitemap for you in XML format. Site Verify, we saw that one. Google Analytics is another one. A couple of the things that I learned as I went through this, and I've got a particular use on that in a project I'm going to be doing on a product side. And I'm probably going to try out this Commerce Good Relations, which essentially is a schema.org structure for products with using Drupal Commerce. So I'm really interested in that one. So this document, I have a link on the Meetup site too. So